Buzz. The first item is that we have indications that your landing site obliques are not in the proper position. If you will check, we think that the intermediate scale landing site oblique is stowed in the CSM Lunar Landmarks book. We think that the large scale landing site oblique is stowed in the back of the LIM Lunar Surface Map book. Over.
It has been exactly 1 calendar year since Space Force 44's only passenger, Jeff Johnston, was launched into the deepest recesses of our galaxy, never to be seen or heard from again. Now, drifting alone in space, unsure of what is happening on his home planet of Earth, and always a little bit sad and a little bit horny, Jeff makes desperate attempts to contact Earth. Will anyone answer his call? Will anyone help him get home?
Anybody hear me? Is anybody there? Hello?
So I want to thank all of my Patreon supporters, and your money makes it.
Hello?
Wait.
Hello?
I hear someone coming in. This is my Patreon live stream.
Hi. This is Jeff. I'm in outer space. Who is this?
This is David Hopkins. Are you interested in giving me $2 every month to help me write?
I guess David. I know a David Hopkins. I know a David Hopkins.
I've heard. I believe I know it, Jeff. At some point, I think we were working simultaneously at Quick, and it went quickly.
Wait, you know a Jeff? That's an uncommon name. That's
well, you pronounced it Geoff, and so I immediately knew that I only know one of those Jeffs.
David, how are you? How the hell are you? That was, like 10 years ago? Something like that? 20 years? 40 years ago?
Yes, it was.
This is when we were both in the Korean War.
Yeah.
Serving. But how are you doing, man? It's good to crack into your Patreon panhandling.
Yeah. I do this every month. I try to convince people that, what's $2? If I can get about 2,000 of you, I can then quit my job.
Cost of a cup of coffee. That hasn't changed.
No. Cup of coffee has cost exactly the same as it always has cost. It's only the cost of long-distance phone calls that have completely plummeted.
Did they bring back 1-800-COLLECT yet? I'm hoping for that.
No, that is gone. I am sorry,
Still
astronaut
gone.
Jeff. Yeah, that is.
Well.
I mean, who knows? Maybe it does exist, and I'm just completely unaware that there's like a cottage industry of just very, very sad people that call 1-900 numbers still.
I remember calling Freddie's Nightmare line when I was a kid.
Oh, I remember that.
That was stuff.
Yeah, it was like $2 a minute, and it was some weird pre-recorded thing. It was like, it was like, okay, we've got phone sex, but how can we make it kid-friendly? Because we feel like kids would call in for $2.99 a minute.
I got it. Pedophile demon with the razor claws.
Great. Call them in. Make sure to ask your mom or dad's permission. Wink, wink. And then they get the bill.
And the party lines, those were hot. Where it would just be like, that was the 80s version, the 80s 900 number version of there are hot singles in your area, I think.
Yeah, the party line.
So what's going on? I mean, I'm in outer space. I think I mentioned.
Yeah, I heard about that.
I just a little while ago. I've been making these distress calls and trying to get some help. I'm up here on a spacecraft, Space Force 44, but I have no astronaut training or interest in astrology or astronomy. I don't know why I'm here or what I'm doing. So I'm sending out these distress calls, trying to talk to somebody back home. And I talked to my buddy Ben last time, and he's in Brooklyn. He told me about this pandemic, this Pam Dauber, pandemic, this terrible disease that's killing people. is that going on? Are you still in Texas? Where are you?
I am. I am in Arlington, Texas, but I always lie to people and say that I'm from Dallas, which is not uncommon for Arlington people. But yeah, no, it's not great. You might be safer where you are right now, although I don't know if you're orbiting aimlessly through the void of space. There are other people who are probably relating to you right now.
Yeah, it's that's what Ben said. I was probably safer where I am, but I mean, I'm isolated. I'm just sitting here in front of a screen, and I'm sure that, you know, back on Earth, people are doing more than that.
No, they're pretty much sitting in front of a screen right now. That's all they're holding on to. It's either that or spend time with their kids or loved ones, but you know.
And so you're in Arlington, and that's, for people who aren't aware, that's where all the sports stadiums and amusement parks are, right?
We are the home of several stadiums. We've got I don't know how long you've been up there, but the Cowboys, we thought they were going to go to Dallas. They're now in Arlington at AT&T Stadium, which looks a little bit like the Death Star. We then decided that the ballpark in Arlington was a horrible mistake because why would you have an outdoor sporting event in the middle of the summer and not put a roof on it? They also decided that not that many people want to watch baseball, so they made a smaller stadium that now has a roof that is right next to the Cowboy Stadium. However, we also have not gotten rid of the previous stadium, so we now have, actually we have 4 stadia. We've got AT&T for the Cowboys. We've got 2 Ranger ballparks, one they use, one they don't use. And then there's also the esports stadium, which is right next to the old Ranger stadium.
Esports, so that's like competitive duck hunt, or what is
Yes.
Okay.
I've wanted to walk in there to see what it is. To the best of my knowledge, it is, it's the video games, but with a crowd.
So there's just a lot of Mountain Dew being consumed and then turned into urine.
Exactly. That is
making more Mountain Dew.
that is a place where, you know, when you've gone to one of those like restrooms in a convention center where all the paper towels are gone and the entire surface is just wet. I imagine that area is just perpetually in that state, where it's just the wet countertop with no paper towels. And so people are just wiping their hands off on whatever's available.
Is that how the pandemic started?
Probably. No, there are many competing theories on how the pandemic started. Many people believe it happened in China and may have happened because someone ate a bat, which...
It sounds like a superhero origin story.
Yeah, it wasn't a radioactive bat. That was the problem. No, you eat a bat and lo and behold, you get sick. My wife is so annoyed with me because I was listening to a Great Courses, which this is also new, but now we actually have the means of putting in our phone many obnoxious educational courses that we can listen to while we drive to work. And I've learned all about the French Revolution, and I recently was on a Great Courses about the bubonic plague. And I started listening to the bubonic plague one about a week before the coronavirus stuff hit. So I kept telling my wife, I was like, oh, this is like in the plague when they did this. And she's like, please stop referencing the plague. I'm like, oh no, this is much better than the plague. It's like that guy who like remembers seeing the Pixies back when like they were really cool. Like, oh yeah, back during Doolittle, it was so much better than now. The bubonic plague, so much cooler. But they were talking about that idea of diseases transferring from animals to humans. So how does the disease get from rat to flea to person? And the theory, at least with the coronavirus, is that it was a bat to person.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm still learning about all of this stuff, and that's fascinating to me. So, do you think you've been exposed to it, or what? Are you safe? Is your family okay? Like, where are you with all this personally?
Yeah, we're doing pretty well. My wife is far more cautious than I am, and it's not because I don't believe that coronavirus is a thing. I don't think that it is a hoax perpetrated by the far left media. I actually do believe that it is good and a right thing to stay inside, which you will be shocked to know that is under debate.
Seriously?
Yes,
No
it is.
way.
There's a whole conversation we can have about this, but basically, I feel like the coronavirus is like the perfect pandemic for our generation because it targets all of our worst instincts. And one of those things is, and it sounds really hippy-dippy, but our country is not known for its emotional intelligence, our EQ. And basic intelligence tells us a pandemic, if it has a 4% mortality rate, that's not anything to scoff at. The emotional intelligence is, I feel like this is dangerous, but because it is an unpleasant truth, I will choose to ignore it and instead cling to wild conspiracy theories until things spiral into chaos. And then I will freak out, but I will only freak out at the point at which it is a completely lost cause. So anyway, yeah, I honestly think that if the coronavirus were just slightly more lethal, we probably would be paying it more attention. There's something about a 4% mortality rate, if that's the number fluctuates. But there's something about that doesn't register with people. They're like, 4%?
It's just a 4. It's just a 4.
Yeah. 4% is fine. I would roll the dice on 4%. But what they don't realize is when you have a country with some 300 million people, that's millions of people.
So what you're talking about is basic math skills. Or escaping. You're thinking 40 people will get sick.
Yeah, 4%. That's nothing. I think the economy is far more important than a few lives. But then that's the other thing, is the reason why the economy is going to go to shit is because lots of people dying is not good for business. That doesn't necessarily mean that restarting the economy will somehow circumvent the problems that are causing the economy to go bad.
Well, David, I think there's a couple of holes in that. I mean, I think, it just depends on what business you're talking about. I think, funeral parlors will flourish.
Except that no one can go to them.
Well, I mean, then you get the virtual arenas will do better. If you have virtual funerals where everybody zooms in to pay their last respects.
Yeah, I think that part of the problem with the coronavirus is that many people are asymptomatic. Some people do just fine with it. Other people absolutely do not. Sometimes it affects old people, but not always. And so what you have is a virus that is wonderfully inconsistent for a culture that needs things to be predictable. And so what you're dealing with is, it's like, well, I knew someone who had it and he was fine. It's like, well, yes, that's how it works. Other people get it and they end up on a ventilator. And it is so inconsistent that we're not able to track it in a meaningful way because we seem to operate entirely by anecdotal evidence that we sometimes create ourselves.
Based on our own experience.
Sometimes.
So if I'm understanding you right, David, this thing sort of manifests itself in so many different ways, from asymptomatic, which I believe means you only have one symptom, a symptom.
A symptom, yeah.
A symptom. Or it's you're not showing that you're sick. You don't feel sick and you don't have symptoms. I don't know why they don't call it non-symptomatic, but because it manifests itself in all of these different ways, from terrible to benign, you can, much like our media choices, you can pick the thing that's happening that aligns with the way you want to address this thing, and then that's how you go forward. It's like, oh yeah, my cousin Charlie knew a guy whose mechanic sneezed on a kid and nothing happened to them. And then, then you have people that believe in science and facts.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that we have a disease that's completely based around confirmation bias. I have information that supports the idea this isn't a big deal, so I'm just going to run with that.
Man, it must be really nice to live like that and not worry about anything or be responsible for the health and safety of the people around you. Just be completely reckless with every decision you make. That must be so freeing.
You know, you would think our president has really made a career out of that, which is also part of the problem. Is diseases should not be partisan issues, but my God, if we have not tried to turn it into one.
Really? We haven't come together as one people, united under a common tragedy to help each other and come out of this better than we went into it?
No, that has not happened, actually. What we find is our entertainment has sort of infected our news. And so in the name of gaining an audience, we have started target marketing our news choices, which has created, in any newspaper, you have the editorial section and you have the news section. But what happens if we just ignore all that, just smash it together into one messy little ball of commentary? Yeah, it's gotten ugly. It's not great.
And that's interesting when you mention marketing, because if I remember correctly, last time I was keeping tabs on you're a professional marketer by trade. I mean, you're a writer.
I am.
I still get some signal up here, and I still see some things coming through on my social media, and I noticed that I was seeing all of these advertisements, and I couldn't tell what they were for exactly, unless it was for shop signs that go from open to closed, or sad piano music, and the phrase "now more than ever" was used a lot. But I had no idea what they were trying to sell me, except for this one that was very specifically about dog vasectomies. But how do you market in this climate without coming off like a tragedy vulture?
Well, you don't. No, it's been interesting. With a lot of the clients that I work with, we pivoted on pretty much everything that we were doing. So everyone that we were talking to all decided simultaneously to throw what we were working on out the window. And overnight, we were literally rewriting months worth of content. And so much of the content used the phrase "during these uncertain times," until we realized a few days later that everyone was using the phrase "during these uncertain times," in which we had to go through everything again and take out the phrase "during these uncertain times." So yeah, it's been funny because the collective unconscious is alive and well with marketing writers, and it seems like we all landed on that phrase at the same time, and then all had to simultaneously pivot in different directions. So, disruption has been a word that we've used a few times during these disruptive times. As the months carry a lot of uncertainty, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. But I mean, so much of it has been either A, telling us that the companies are still open for business, or we're need your business, or don't forget that eventually we will be back and doing business. Yeah, I think the emails have gotten a little bit much.
I noticed that too, because I still get emails, and a few weeks ago I was getting all of these emails from places I hadn't shopped at in years, like all these online retailers. I'm like, why does Old Navy want to know if I'm doing all right? It seemed really weird, but a lot of this stuff's making sense now that I talk to you. We've
gotten to an age in which corporations have become people, and so Old Navy is now very concerned about your health and safety and wants to just make sure that you and your family are doing all right. If you emailed Old Navy back, you probably might get a response. I don't know. It's worth checking into.
What would I ask Old Navy?
How are your kids? How's life?
Just ping them back. We're doing good, Old Navy. How's, did you get that knee surgery?
Yeah. I know that Old Navy was really looking forward to seeing how the NBA season wrapped up, but it was kind of tough on Old Navy.
Oh, yeah. But let's not joke about that. I know you're a huge basketball fan. What
I am.
what was what was going on with basketball? Who was doing what?
Well, the team that wears the jersey that I like, the Dallas Mavericks, I was watching the game. I think they were playing against the Denver Nuggets. And during the game, while it was going on, they were announcing that the NBA season was going to be put on hold. We're not playing basketball anymore. We're just going to stop. Oh, this is a real thing. It is odd because I don't know how you draw a connection between 9/11, which I don't know if you were here for that.
There's indications that I've only been out here a year. So
That's good.
Trump was the president, and I know what Space Force is, and I'm in a Space Force craft. So I think it's been about a year. So yeah, I remember the 9/11.
But yeah, the interesting thing about 9/11 is, there's a lot of difference between, say, a terrorist group, trying to attack the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and other sites, and a natural disaster like a virus. But people are like, oh, this is our 9/11. This is our big. I've heard that, and I'm like, wait, what? Were we really waiting to find out what the next big thing was in global tragedy? And then even they were like, okay, more people have died now from coronavirus than died during 9/11. It's like, okay, well, Katrina, that happened too. But all right,
Yeah,
so this is not our Katrina. This is our 9/11.
It seems like an apples oranges kind of comparison. Like,
Yeah.
why would you even? Those things don't equate on really any level other than the loss of human life. And even then, you're talking about loss of life in an instant versus over a period of time as things kind of, it's just a real slow burn of human death and tragedy. Is it that people considerably younger than us were just waiting to have a 9/11? Like, oh, I can't wait till there's a 9/11 I can claim for my own.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that idea of what is the generationally defining sort of thing that sort of changes everything. And honestly, I mean, I don't know what the future holds, but will this change how we operate in the future? What will be the lasting impact of this beyond the loss of life, beyond any economic impacts? Will this change how we interact with people? I don't know, but I do know that my teenage daughter, you think about when you're in high school, man, high school felt like it lasted forever. And she pretty much got one semester of her high school just kind of wiped off. And, it's like there are plays that she wanted to be in. There were performances she wanted to do, people she wanted to hang out with. She's got her 16th birthday party, which, once again, these are small things compared to what some people in New York City are dealing with right now and what we may be dealing with in a couple of weeks. But I think when you talk about generationally defining tragedies, it's that idea that you can somehow all, in the words of Douglas Copeland, we're all thinking the same, we're all feeling the same way right now.
So
I think that's part of it.
With our parents and like JFK being assassinated or Vietnam, like it's a cultural touchstone that they can all reference or immediately get to, and they all have that one point where they may not agree on the politics or the circumstances around it, but it is something they all felt and experienced personally as a nation.
And the difference is, I remember watching the television when the plane hit the World Trade Center. I don't know what that moment is for this kind of slow tidal wave. What is the singular moment? It's not the NBA. It's, for my daughter, is it me sitting down with her? And, it's funny because we've got a 4-year-old, and the thing that we tell her is very different than what we tell the 15-year-old. The 4-year-old, we say, okay, everything's closed right now. People are kind of sick, so we have to wash our hands and be healthy. And then I sit down with my 15-year-old, and I'm like, I'm not going to lie to you. People are going to do really stupid things, and a lot of people are going to die that don't need to. This is going to be really terrible for a long time. I need you to look after your baby sister for a while we're trying to get work done.
I mean, that's good. I mean, I think you can't take the same approach with the teenagers. They'll see right through that or take complete advantage of you.
Exactly. Well, and then the other thing with, kind of trying to lay it out to her is just this idea of really kind of bringing home that this is a big deal, because she's going to get a lot of news from a lot of different sources. And so you kind of have to lay it out in the most honest terms that you can. But yeah, it sucks to be a teenager trapped in your house with your parents. You just want to get out.
I remember about when I was a kid growing up, and I think maybe we had a pretty decent pocket of time, folks like you and I who are in our early to mid 20s.
Sure.
And then doubled. That, in the late 70s through the 80s and into the early 90s, it wasn't, there was terrible corruption, and it sort of built the system that we have now. But we didn't have a 9/11, and I remember my parents kind of having, they grew up in the South in the 60s and moved to New York City to raise their kids. And so they were all about, like, you live in this utopia of cultural cross-contamination where, you get to experience all this great food and art, and there's no draft, and there's no war, and there'll never be war again. And, and it was a little bit of a hippie fever dream that wasn't actually what was happening, because a lot of I think those social and racial things were just taken up to the C-suite and reorganized so that those same people were impacted, but it was along the lines of, voting and where people could feasibly live and stuff like that, and how that translates into everything else. So we have this happy life, and so I think it's important for us to sit down our kids that are maybe a little older and go, don't believe anything anyone says, because if they're still alive, chances are they've never experienced anything like this before. It's not anything that's happened in a lifetime, pretty much. And people old enough to have remembered things like this are probably touched in the head, so to speak, and are not the most reliable narrators. So I think that's a smart thing, is to tell, you can't tell your 4-year-old, like, yeah, we're putting on masks because we don't want to die. But yeah, to your teenagers who are kind of straddling that line between I know it all and I don't know anything, and if I look to the grown-ups that I like for some sort of sense of what's going on in the world. I mean, it might be a little bit frightening, but I would think that for an older kid that's well-adjusted, it's comforting to know that, yeah, Dad doesn't have this shit figured out either. And so
exactly.
We'll get through it together as a family, whatever that means.
Or if April and I both get wiped out, she has to raise her sister now. So, that's the other option.
That'd make a great, like, lone wolf and cub situation. She's got, like, a samurai sword, like, going across the devastated Arlington.
I do have a samurai sword in the shed. It's just it doesn't. It's decorative. It wouldn't be nearly as cool. But yeah, no, they're totally going to ride through the apocalypse together. But it is funny because, usually we'd say, okay, go to Grandma and Grandpa's, but we don't trust them as much either. No, I mean, they've been doing fine. Like, if we are, mostly thanks to my wife, if we're at like 90% doing what we should be doing, and I'm always the one wanting to make exceptions. I'm like, well, they seem to be okay. We can hang out with them. But she's like, nope, we're going to stick to this. My parents, if we're at 90%, they're at like 75% doing what they should. And then there's the other question, which is, what percentage are you okay with for them? And so I think my wife has a threshold of anywhere between like 85 to 100% is kind of her, you're doing the quarantine correctly. And I think my parents are like right under that. So actually for Easter, we had them sitting out in our driveway in chairs that we set out for them while we sat on our front porch like the Lord and Lady of the Manor, and they came to address us. And so we had a nice, good hour-long conversation with them sitting about 20 feet from us while we were sitting over them. It was a weird and wonderful power trip. They just wanted to see their grandchildren, and we're like, Tell us, have you been to Costco lately?
So you're trying to evaluate their exposure at that point.
Yeah.
And so
Okay, Dad. So you played golf. How close were you next to your golfing buddy? So it is funny just having this whole conversation with them, and you could tell they just want to like hug their grandkids. And we're like, so were you wearing masks when you were at Costco? What about gloves? Did you wash? No.
Oh.
My wife, she is committed. We are going to we're going to get out on the other side of this. But I keep trying to tell my wife, I'm like, I tell her, I say, sweetie, I said, we could do everything right, and someone blowing bubbles next door could like land on us and like little coronavirus pop, and then all of a sudden it's just impossible to know. You pick up the mail and I don't know. I mean, I just kind of want to bring her to the idea that if I do get sick, it's not my fault.
That's good. I mean, it sounds like she's playing it, 100% safe, and it's like it's one of these situations. It sounds like you have to be overly cautious to get even the fourth best outcome, and that's if you're lucky. Like, I think maybe she knows that it could be something you have absolutely no control of and would happen anyway, but you have to be able to say, I did everything I could, and I still got this fucking shit.
Yeah.
And then blame it on you.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. Who knows what it is? But yeah,
I told you we should have all been wearing beekeeper outfits.
Yes, exactly. Well, and even my wife has begun like heavily Googling like cabins in the woods, and we just like go out. And I don't think we're going to be relocating from Arlington anytime soon, but I bet the thought has crossed her mind.
I mean, it's good somebody's looking ahead to the apocalypse.
Of course.
Speaking of apocalypse,
great segue.
Didn't you, writer David Hopkins, just release a trilogy?
Kind of. Yes.
What have you released in the world of literature lately that is frighteningly relevant, yet somehow as a marketer you can't seem to really sell it? What's going on, man?
I know. It was funny. About 5 years ago, I started work on a novel because I had worked in comics. I had written other things. I was like, you know what? I don't want to get to the end of my life and have never written a novel. Like, I feel like that's on my list of things to do before I go. So I worked on this novel called Wear Chainmail to the Apocalypse, and I finished it about 2 years ago. I spent about a year editing it, and I had some people read it and said it didn't suck, and so we kept working on it. And then I spent about a year trying to get it published, at which point I was like, okay, this really sucks. Seriously, I have not cried as hard as I did when I got like my 100th rejection from a literary agent.
Oh,
it was
triple digits.
It was like real tears, and it's embarrassing because like I've had family members pass away in the past like decade or so, and somehow I'm like sobbing because some agent sent me a form email that was like, we just do not think that you are a correct fit for us right now. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And I'm like, son of a bitch, this sucks. Yeah, it was not my proudest moment. It was not me at my best.
And on the publisher's like the about page, it's like so if like you should have gotten it. It's just like, we like to publish post-apocalyptic satire by writers named David Hopkins who live in Arlington. And you're like, I got this, and then 2 months later, whatever, you get the letter, and it's just, how did I not get this?
Yeah, there's not. Well, and that was the other thing that was so funny is I talked to one of my more successful writer friends, because that's always fun. And she was
try not to have those people.
Yeah, you really got to curate your friends.
Yeah, present company
better than
excluded.
But like, she was telling me, she was like, yeah, nobody's publishing apocalyptic literature right now. They are done with the apocalypse. And this was about a year ago or so that I guess everything in the world of YA, and this is not a YA book, but everything is like apocalyptic. It's like zombies apocalypse, vampire apocalypse, I don't know, love story apocalypse. It was just too much Hunger Games, too much end of the world type stuff. And so,
Dead.
Walking Dead. Everyone was kind of burnt out on it. And me, like, taking the slow way to finishing a novel. If I had finished the novel like within a year, I would have like hit that sweet spot.
Yeah.
But it was like, I took way too long, and then everyone's like, man, fuck that. No, we're moving on.
But you were careful and deliberate with your craft, like you should be. And you got bit in the ass because you run to market with some bullshit fucking zombie love story.
Man, I envy them. But yeah, so instead, no one wanted to publish it because apparently that genre was dead. Thus, I talked with another friend who told me that there are these things called ebooks. You put it on a glowing screen, and people can read it without the burden of turning pages. So
that sounds wildly convenient.
Yeah, it does. And yet people are very resistant to it in some ways. It's funny, though, because whenever I print about my book that's available through this format, people are always like, well, when's it going to be available in print? Nope, sorry, it is not coming out in print.
It sounds like they're just trying to buy time.
They are like, I don't really want to read this, but I will use the reason that you did not publish it in the one format that I read. And I tried to respond.
The most expensive format.
Yeah. And I want to tell them, I'm like, you are literally reading words on a screen right now because we're on Facebook having this conversation. So the proof of concept is right here. I know that you read on a screen. But no, so he suggested, though, to break up the novel into 3 smaller books. And so why sell one book one time when you can sell 3 small books each individually? And I guess it's the way that people are doing it now, particularly with people who go just the digital route. It's kind of the way you publish novellas, and you read the first third of it and you go, okay, this didn't suck. I'll read the second book and then I'll read the third, and they're each about $3.99, and at the end of it you get a full book experience. I'm still figuring out how this whole works. I don't know if I'm doing it correctly, but it is weird because people are like, so you wrote a novel? And I'm like, kind of. That was like literally the one thing I wanted to accomplish. And at the end of it, I'm like, I took my novel and cut it into 3 pieces, and now it's
But then can't you, like, on some arbitrary anniversary, release it as a full novel then?
Oh, totally intended to do that. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, what are this is fascinating. What's the novel about?
The novel is about the end of the world, the apocalypse, and it just so happens that there was a marketing writer who is in no way based off of the author, not at all, who is basically telling the story of the world after it has ended. And he meets up with some people that work at a medieval times-like place. So not actually medieval times, because I don't want to get a cease and desist letter on my novel, but a place much like medieval times. And so the writer meets up with these people who, of course, they've got the swords and the plate mail, they've got the horses, and they are making a journey. So it's an apocalyptic road trip, and they are going to a log cabin village in just south of Austin. It doesn't really exist, but just south of Austin, where they're hoping that they might meet up with others to restart civilization. So it's definitely, it's not breaking new ground in the world of apocalyptic literature, but it's a lot of fun to write, and I think people are enjoying the book. I definitely take a very satirical look at the world, because in between each chapter, he writes about the world that once was, kind of from the backwards-looking perspective. So what did it mean to have a car back in that day? What did it mean, what was celebrity? Celebrities don't survive the apocalypse. What does it mean to be a celebrity? And so those little moments were sort of my moment to break out my op-ed instincts and just sort of rant about that. But the story essentially is, a story of survival. It's a story of, people connecting during extreme moments. And it was fun researching all the different ways the world could end right up until the point that the coronavirus hit. So I listened to this really great podcast called How the World Ends. And one of them was all about pandemics. I remember telling my wife, I was like, you know what? If there was a way that the world's going to get wiped out, this is the one I'm putting my money on. And then, of course, coronavirus hits, and I'm like, yeah, this isn't nearly bad enough. But that's the other thing about the COVID-19 coronavirus situation is everyone now thinks they're an expert in epidemiology. So...
Well, did you foresee anything in the book that sort of came about in one way or another, or if not that, is there some stuff that went completely the other way? I mean,
I did predict, at least in the book, I was really focused on the idea that this zombie apocalypse was not the result of an angry god, but was really the result of a science experiment gone wrong, which is the other more popular way that zombies happen. But there's that idea that we currently in our research facilities do not have good safety protocols about how we can contain viruses. And of course, one of the theories about the coronavirus was that it was not a person eating a bat, but it was actually something that was accidentally released because of faulty lab security procedures. I don't know if that's true or not, and I'm not even going to speculate that it is, because it's probably not. But I don't know, because I'm not an expert. But that was one of the things that has often been a concern is, scientists create these viruses in order to kill the viruses in order to learn how to kill other viruses. But the viruses they create are not ones that should be getting out. And so that was part of how the story opened. I think that some of the commentary on people being isolated was probably on point. My narrator shows up to work even while the world around him is falling apart. And I feel like that rings true in that, like things are going crazy and people are like, okay, but how do I get to work? Are the elevators going to be working? Will I have to use my key fob to get in? I'm like, dude, just stay home with your family. No. I really have to send out those emails, and I have to do it from my cubicle. So, yeah, the idea that someone would come to work when the whole world around him was falling apart, at the time that I wrote it, it felt like that character was being really stupid. And then I'm like, oh, no, that would actually happen. So...
Well, David, this has all been awesome. Can you tell me how I can access your Patreon or where I could go to order your book?
Everything that I do is on thatdavidhopkins.com. So if you go to davidhopkins.com, you're shit out of luck. You got to go to thatdavidhopkins.com. You can sign up for my newsletter where you'll actually get a free copy of my short story collection if you sign up for it. But then also all the links to all the other things is there. But if you do go to patreon.com/davidhopkins, all the other stuff is there as well. It looks like I got another Patreon supporter. I gotta go talk to them to make sure that they stay. So it was good talking to you.
Quick.
I gotta go. Hold on.
But real quick, David, can you call the cops or the president or this Tiger King guy? Does he have any authority? David. Damn it.
Well, I believe that's what they call a fine how do you do. That was my friend David Hopkins, the very talented writer and marketing person out of Arlington or Dallas, depending on who you ask. I'm glad to know he's safe and well, and I encourage anyone within the sound of my voice to go to thatdavidhopkins.com. That's ThatDavidHopkins.com. Sign up for his newsletter, and you'll get a free PDF of his short story collection, We Miss All the Great Parties. Don't miss that great offer. I should be in marketing.
And then if you go to Amazon or from his website or wherever, do check out Wear Chainmail to the Apocalypse. People are calling it a unique blend of apocalyptic horror, action, humor, and reality. Other people are saying suspense and humor fold deftly in this story, along with some very excellent introspection. Their words, not mine. And yet a third person is saying it's an entertaining romp through the end of the world. And I think we could all use something like that right about now. Call me crazy and call me kooky. Call me what you will. Here's an idea for you there. If you're listening to this part right here, chances are you listened to the whole episode, or you fell asleep while it was on. But either way, why don't you do this old salty corn dog a favor and tell your friends about this here cast that I'm potting. Share it with a neighbor, a loved one, or an enemy. Just don't keep it a secret. Friends don't keep secrets, right? I would really, really appreciate it. And I would be your friend forever. Not a guarantee. Until next time, transmitting distress calls to Earth from Space Force 44, my name is Jeff. I am the passenger, saying thank you for listening, now more than ever.